Oh, hello, and welcome to Al Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist.
I'm Mikey, the E stands for evil.
And I'm the gamer in yellow.
And we're here to discuss those internet stories, most creepy and most pasta, and be critically silly doing it. And tonight we have yet another of the Won't Think Straight stories. The worst thing about growing old. So, the worst thing about growing old is the next installment in the Won't Think Straight saga on Reddit NoSleep. So you can check it out there. And
writing of that was kind of funny.
What?
It's like the worst thing about getting old is the next installment to this series.
I mean,
it's part of getting old.
It's both true. It's true on both levels.
I suppose.
Like it is the story, like it is the title of the story, but it's also like the worst. The worst thing about growing old is this story.
How dare you?
I mean, that is actually in my actual thoughts.
Oh, okay.
Regarding like the themes of this story. So, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we should give our initial recommendations. I will recommend it.
I will not recommend it.
Interesting. I'll recommend it, although I'm very curious as to why the harsh no.
Yeah. Well, it may not be a harsh.
I feel like
it might just be like
I might be swapping to a partial by the end of this.
Yeah, we'll have to see. So
yes,
and it may not be a harsh no. He may just not cared for it. So
yeah.
But we'll have to see through our dialogue here in this through our discussion of the story. Starting, I suppose we should kick this off with the rundown, though. So, following the funeral and wake of his great-grandmother, Cassandra, WTS, otherwise known as Won't Think Straight, since we don't actually have a name for this guy, learns of some new stories from his uncle regarding an old folks' care home. It went by many names over the years, but the earliest one was the Sunset Eden. It started off with a caring staff, but as time and management changed, it soon became a cruel and greedy place. The elderly were treated horribly, and after an accident back in the 30s, revolving around the suicide of a Mr. Finley in Ward 306, that's when the room got a rep for being haunted, with other people dying in it soon after. But things got really freaky when the fifth person who committed suicide in that place did so in such a very violent and bloody way, leaving a cryptic message on the wall that no matter how hard they tried would always stain through, whether it be paint or wallpaper and such. So the shitty administration staff decided that in 1971 they were going to turn this room into a punishment for the rowdy patients. If the elderly got out of line for any reason, they were to be put into Ward 306 for a night. People, of course, claimed to see and hear things, specifically a young girl with her eyes missing. But things really changed when a Mrs. Wainwright was placed in the room for 2 days. Or I guess for 2 nights. She tried initially to fight the orderlies when she was getting put into the room. But as soon as she passed through the door, she became very quiet and compliant, just smiling and nodding toward the orderlies. And then toward the door as they left, and for the next 2 nights. She proceeded to be smiling and nodding toward the door, creeping the staff out in the process. Whenever they come inside during those 2 nights, or like during those couple of days, to like give her food and clean up and stuff like that, she'd actually hiss and bite toward them. Then, when they went to release her, they found her sitting away from the door on her bed, but she was quite dead. Had been, according to the doctor, for 2 nights. heart attack, likely while fighting the orderlies. Her family was furious and tried to sue, but ultimately settled out of court, and a few years later, the facility was closed for bankruptcy and demolished for new buildings. WTS goes on some more about how dreadful getting old is, especially when things just beyond the veil are waiting for us and want to get to us. He then signs off with the cryptic message that was mentioned earlier, translating it from Latin. It read, "Time devours all. I was what you are. You'll be what I am. Finn." And yeah, that was the story of the worst thing about growing old. So I suppose we should move on to everyone tolerates the grammar inquisitions. At this point, I've got a couple. I will start with this one here. The staff would open the door. Hang on. Just going into like like elementary school reading like mode. The staff would open the doors in the morning to find these residents cowering and huddling. They're cowering and huddled in their bed with their blankets cocooned and shredded underneath them on the floor. So I think it's supposed to be morning, not mooring. I did check online to see if like mooring, like in the mooring was like a term somewhere for the morning, but I think it's just a typo.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And then the next one I have here. That night, the guard doing the rounds that night would find her in the beam of his flashlight, still lying in bed, smirking and nodding toward the door. They mostly come at night, mostly. That's the kind of moment I had here with the that night, the guard doing his rounds that night. Like I just feel like the
Wasn't
secondary...
it? No, it was the night guard doing his. I remembered one that was basically saying like the night guard was doing his nightly rounds that night or something like that.
Wow. I don't remember that one in this story, but the example I gave was that night, comma, the guard doing the rounds that night.
Yeah, it is a little much.
Yeah, so just remove the second use of night, I think is appropriate.
Yep.
And then my last grammar inquisition is this one here. When it was time for her to be released the next day, the orderlies found her sit on the bed with her back to the door. So I think it should be the orderlies found her sitting on the bed, not just sit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's all I've got for grammar inquisition. So, Mikey, D stands for evil.
Well, I have a conjunction junction.
Ooh.
And next stop, Conjunction Junction. Doot doot.
It had undergone many name changes over the years, but started reputably enough as the Sunset Eden with a caring and dedicated nursing staff. It's more the psychological toll. And no tool was more effective at the Sunset Eden than an infamous room with a sinister reputation. But stains would always gradually seep back through, marking them with splashes of blood or ghostly faces. It had become a standard procedure for night watchmen to patrol the wards throughout the night. It was a young girl, thin, deathly pale, and unmoving. It was not until the footsteps of the guard returning could be heard that the girl shifted. It would start as a gentle pull, like a heavy blanket slowly falling from its own weight. But of all these stories, the most chilling was that of Miss Wainwright. It was a futile effort, and the moment they pried her arms away and carried her through, it was as if all the fight had drained from her body. But they would also tell you that's not the worst things about growing old. It's knowing there exists dark forces and sinister lurking beyond and waiting patiently. And that death may not mark the end of your torment, but merely the beginning. Finn.
Wow, that was relatively succinct version of the rundown I already did. The two things that I noticed though was like when the it seemed to have a focus like the person that actually saw the in your version of this. It's almost like the night watchman is the one that saw the creepy girl through the like through the window with the lighting and stuff of that. Because I think in the story it's the patient in the room as like the light is passing through the wall, like through his room.
Right.
And then the other one was like how quickly you just like skimmed past Mrs. Wainwright's like she just like she was fighting and then she just gave up, and then it's like, and that's the first thing about getting old is is knowing that when you die it's almost like she just like she just given up or just died right there, and then that's the word.
And for those unaware, Mikey grabs all the sentences that start with words that they probably shouldn't, like its, ands, or buts, because there's always better words to use.
Yeah.
He strings them into a story. I forgot to say that before.
Yeah,
I'm disjointed now, but you get it.
Yeah, if you're a long time listener,
you've heard me
it.
say this enough. You get it.
And for you new people, like, yeah, he does this, and we often like comment about it afterward because sometimes the way he tells it, it kind of creates like a silly story or like adds like creates its own little narrative. So it's one of the reasons I've allowed it all these years. Because sometimes I don't entirely agree.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, well, because sometimes I don't like necessarily like agree with it, but like at this point, it's a shtick. So, but yeah, Gamer, you're up next with the Grammarly mill. Oh, okay.
I actually don't have any. Yeah.
All right. Then I suppose we'll move on to actual thoughts. So I'm gonna start with this part here. Pretty sure this is like the first bit, or like in the first sentence, or the first paragraph of the story. Most of us will one day face a moment when we realize our best days are far behind us. That moment may stalk up gradually, when one day we'll blink and our hands have become old, our bodies pained and feeble, our souls weary and our minds forgetful. One day a stranger will be reflecting back in the mirror. You know, that's fine. I didn't need to be happy today reading a creepypasta. Like, this story like really started off like sad, tragic, like really
real, like
really
way
reflective.
too real.
Yeah, like really reflective. Like, that's
very
fine.
impactful wording, though. Honestly.
Oh yeah. Oh, it gets even worse. It's like that's like I think the lighter notes. Yeah. Also, that is the first paragraph. But like even like the second paragraph's even worse. like just fuck it, I'll just read it. It's like, the beautiful, healthy, brilliant person we once were will have faded, never to be found again. Gone, too, will be the people loved and cherished over a lifetime, until we sit in our prison built of failing flesh and mind, filled with a lifetime worth of regrets, of things left undone. Fuck.
Yeah, I read that, then immediately got up and started working on stuff that I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's just like, you know what? I'm gonna take a second.
I'm not fucking around anymore.
Like, goddamn, and it's appropriate because like this story's coming off of WTS, like having to go to his great grandma Cassandra's funeral, which he was like the favorite of, and so like you can kind of almost feel the grief in his in these words, like from the character. So it is kind of impactful. It's impactful on like a couple of levels. Like, it's impactful, like both like the words are impactful because like they're very reflective about like the about how like things like life ends and eventually things end and stuff like that. But it's also like for the character, you can kind of get a little bit more insight in the narrator as a character and like what they're going through. So, but But yeah, so yeah, it's just like really sad, but also like really impactful, like you said, gamer.
Mhm.
So I'll move on to the next thing I have here. Officially called Ward 306, it was known as the suicide room by staff and residents due to its unusual history. A small ward with space for 2 beds and its own ensuite. It was part of a hospital building converted in 1932. For the first few years, nothing distinguished it from any of the other rooms. So I'm reading this part, and again, like it does say that this ward specifically was converted from like an old hospital back in the day. But like also talking about like the actual like the operations of the actual like care home and stuff like that. I was like, is this an old folks care home or a psychiatric hospital? Like
Yeah.
I know they can look very similar. Like I've had grandparents that have been in an old care folks home, and like walking into those places, sometimes it does like there are a couple of floors that are kind of like a psychiatric home or a psychiatric hospital and stuff like that. Like with the way the mind is degenerated for some of these people. And like again, also back in the day, because like this isn't necessarily a modern facility. This is a facility that dates back to like the 40s or 30s, and like most of the story I think takes place in like through the 60s and the 70s. But all that, it's like I was getting more of an asylum vibe than anything else
Yes.
in this.
Well, that's kind of the point. Like they're kind of
Yeah.
interchangeable, at least back
and
then.
No.
Yeah, and like back then, it was like very much, I think, to a degree, like they were kind of interchangeable. Like that's where you sent your old folks, like your feeble and your old, unfortunately, to places like this.
It's
And
like
also
the worst case scenario with like the management doesn't really care about the people. All they care about is profits. And
Yeah.
like they're hiring worse and worse people, so like the people there don't even care about the people. They're just there for the money, or worse, they're there for a power trip
Yeah, exactly.
to like control people.
Yeah, and the story does say that. So like the story does explain like why this place, like it started off as like a place for care and stuff like that, and then
Yes.
as it went on, it started degenerating itself because of just like the use of money and like the switching of management and stuff like that. So, Mikey, were you going to say something? Sorry, we kind of cut you off.
Yeah. The whole thing seems more like a prison or insane asylum.
Yeah.
Than an old folks' home.
And I mean, again, also, I know this kind of from doing some work with Hebanon Games and Red Markets and like doing maps and layouts for like buildings and stuff. I actually know that like a lot, and especially I think in the States, a lot of those kind of places were designed in the same way that prisons were designed. So yeah, it's that might be also why it's
Like for the layout of it, basically.
yeah, like the layout and stuff like that, like having like a central hub, and then like having these like these like wars or these like off wings kind of thing, right? So
well,
they are kind
yeah,
of designed
but
to like keep them in and like not.
they are designed that way, but it's also the person's home. Like
Yeah,
they're paying to be there, whereas in an insane asylum or a prison, you're not paying to be there. You're just there.
well, technically you're not, but your family might be paying to keep you there. But yeah, I get what you're saying, because again, like I had a grandmother that was sent to an old care home. Well, not even, it's a senior's home.
Yeah.
But it was basically like it was very similar to one of these places, like in layout, but it was also like more like an apartment that she lived in.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Yeah, so I kind of like, but the way this is describing it, that's not what what I'm really visualizing. I'm visualizing like an asylum.
Yeah.
Something from like the movie The Ward.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, even the use of Ward 306, like that's, to me, that feels more like a that could be the proper terminology for one of these places, but it also brings to mind for me, to the surface, more of a like a mental hospital or psychiatric care place, like of olden times, sort of like terminology.
Mhm.
But yeah. That's just one of the things I had about this. This became a horror movie setting very quickly. But again, it should also be pointed out, I guess, this is also set in a time period where those might have been the unfortunate reality of those kind of places. So compared to more modern setting. But I digress. I'll move on. The next one here is actually regarding some of the deaths that were in 306. The third and fourth had simultaneously placed pistols in their mouths and splattered the walls with their brains. Wait, where the hell did they get pistols? I know this place
Good
is
point.
I know this place is being set up to be a shithole, and it is a old folks care home, not a prison. It's not supposed to be a prison, so they can go out and do stuff, and they might be able to come back in with stuff like that. Or this might even be in America, so they might be allowed to have guns in their old folks care homes. But that is just goddamn incompetent.
It really is.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next thing I have here. It's a little long-winded, but I feel it must be said. Over the years, the room would be inspected many times by different engineers to explain the causes. They concluded the wall stains were most likely the accumulated leaks from rusted pipes running through the inner walls. The putrid smell from broken sewage drains. Hang on, there's a grammar inquisition there I just noticed. The putrid smell from broken sewerage drains under the bathroom. So quick thing. Just I'm pretty sure that should say sewage drains, not sewerage.
Mhm.
Is sewerage a word? It has an R in there, so it's sewerage. I gotta look this up. I'm sorry. Hang on.
Into a sewer, I always get sewer rage.
Oh no! Oh, hang on. Apparently, sewerage.
Sewer levels are the worst.
Sewerage is the correct spelling for the system of pipes and structures that collect and transport wastewater. Okay, my bad. Moving. I learned how to spell a new word today. I learned kind of a new word today. Moving on. So yeah, putrid smell, broken sewerage drains under the bathroom. The room's acoustic signature, amplifying vibrations from the outside or from an outside air conditioning unit to create strange noises, and its condenser increased the humidity in the room. Combined with the room's aspect that kept it away from direct sunlight, the temperature would be constantly cooler than the outside. Hey, story, stop. You're doing it again. Stealing Mikey's job and danifying the situation.
I don't get a chance to do it too much.
Yeah. Just we just dive into one of those in the arms of an angel, those adverts of it's hey, it's would you like to donate to this cosmic demon can't mundanify a story if the stories do it for him for just 90 cents a month. I don't know. I'm being really silly there.
Sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah, the story tries to mundanify. I guess it tries to kind of rationalize this is probably why all these things are happening. But then we go on to the next thing here. In 1971, they had what seemed to them a clever idea. Ward 306 would be used as an unofficial punishment room. When elderly residents weren't being cooperative enough, they were threatened with being placed in the suicide room, euphemistically called spending a night with Sue. Okay. Fuck these asshole admins. Fuck the administration that runs this place. Fuck them. They are the absolute scum of the earth. But that is such a good term for the punishment.
I'm not wrong.
Spending is time to spend a night with Sue. It's like to describe like spending a night in the quote unquote suicide room. Like, damn, that is a good term for that. Also, congrats, Story. You've done an excellent job of villainizing the administration staff of this elderly home. I hate these people and wish them the worst. Like, I kind of wish the story would have them like be like have something horrible happen to them. With how well the story kind of like villainizes them. But
sadly no.
And then the next thing I have here, such as that of a certain Mr. Fisher, Sam Fisher. You're welcome, gamer.
I wish.
This is where Sam Fisher ended up.
I mean, he's pretty old nowadays.
Yeah,
that's where the guns came from. He smuggled them in. He was climbing on the ceiling and shit, smuggled them in.
They didn't kill themselves. Sam just like descended from the
assassinated them. Wow.
He put in
That's
that
my new headcanon.
He also stabbed that poor Mr. Finley, and then like put like wrote like some cryptic message on the wall.
Oh, so he did all of this now?
Yeah, this place isn't haunted. It's just Sam Fisher's retirement home.
Yeah.
and
the ghost was just like it was like a scarecrow like gas that just made them visualize shit that wasn't there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a gas leak. And like it's just Sam Fisher just like who's snapped in his old age and is just like killing his fellow patients. Oh wow. I'm moving on to the next thing I have. It was a futile effort, and the moment they pried her arms away and carried her through, it was as if all the fight had drained from her body. She was suddenly quiet and cooperative, just smirking and nodding, while they tucked her into bed. As they locked the door, Mrs. Wainwright was still smirking and nodding at them through the glass. So 2 ideas popped up to me when in this scene, in this moment. Either she had some plan going in, and that's why she was smirking and nodding, like just as planned kind of thing. Like there's a plan for her to do this, because that's what it kind of sounded like leading up to this point. It kind of seemed like Mrs. Wainwright like had a plan or something like that, or was like kind of being devious about something here that we were going to get revealed, but that doesn't happen. Or the other thing that popped in my mind at this moment was she was immediately possessed by something as soon as she entered the room. And then as we find out in a second, with my next quote, cockroaches were crawling out of her open mouth. She was dead. Rigor mortis had already set and started to fade. An autopsy revealed that she had died 2 days earlier from cardiogenic shock, heart attack, likely brought on by the stress and exertion in her struggles being brought into the room. Okay, so yeah, possessed by something like she, and just like how like a spirit might possess an empty vessel in Shadowrun. Sorry, Mikey. I actually only bring this up because recently in one of our games on One Less Die, or that we've been recording for One Less Die, our sister podcast, plug, we're having some talks about a similar situation where like to get a spirit to weekend at Bernie's a character. So
That's true.
So yeah, I just
connective tissues time.
It's sort of a connective tissue time. Also, like plugging our other podcast. But yeah, that's what it reminded me of. It was like, oh yeah, it's like so spirit did possess it. And honestly, as macabre as it is, I really like the idea that like her body getting possessed the instant she expires from the heart attack, and the orderlies just didn't notice her die. Because they were probably just recovering themselves, or like have just just thankful that she had stopped resisting. Because even with like two big orderlies, like having to manage like a full grown woman is still going to be it's still like a lot of meat and that's flailing around. So like that's going to be exhausting. But yeah, so like they probably didn't even notice that she had expired, and then so they didn't even notice that when she died, and then as soon as she died, this ghost possessed her. Or perhaps as soon as she entered the room, got close enough to the room, the ghost possessed her and killed her, and then like took over her body, kind of thing. So yeah, I as macabre as it is, I really like that idea of like a spirit or a demon thing possessing this body as it dies from
It was
natural.
such a smooth transition too that like in the moment we didn't really know why or what happened, but
Yeah.
like it's explained later, and
And-
it's like a very good like, oh shit.
Yeah, and there is at least like, yeah, we don't know what's happening, but we know that something's changed because she suddenly gave up and she just kept smirking and nodding. Even when she was like tucked in bed, she wouldn't stop looking at the window in the door and like smirking and nodding. Like there's something clearly going on here. There's something clearly wrong with her now. Also, because the way you said that, like how smooth it was like I immediately thought it was like she been struck by a smooth criminal. Bum, bum, ba, dum,
Yeah, push her in there, and then she immediately does the lean, snaps back up.
Yeah, immediately just as the moonwalk to bed. Moving on to
That's haunting that room now.
oh no, there is already there is already a creepypasta based on Michael Jackson, or based on a misinterpretation of Michael Jackson.
Surprised.
Yeah, I think it's like I think it's based out of the Philippines or something like that. It's like the Awioki. It's called the Awioki, but it's basically it's literally like it's like late stage Michael Jackson like appearance wise, but like and just deformed and like made even more made hideous. I'm not gonna say made more hideous because that's just being disrespectful to poor Michael Jackson. But yeah, basically they made him like this boogeyman named Awioki, and yes, the name of it stems from a sort of a language barrier aspect where it was just like, are you okay? One day we might look into that story. I know we've mentioned it once before on the show, so I think somewhere, but or it might have been like some off recording.
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
I know there's also a horror video game based off of it too, where you're trying to like navigate a mansion and trying to avoid being caught by the Awioki. And they even use the wee as a signifier that he's near.
Nice.
All right. Anyways, moving on to come back onto the story, back at hand. Next one I have here is this quote: "The Sunset Eden would go bankrupt a few years later and be demolished to make way for new office blocks. Even buildings will face their end." So I feel like this aspect here, where like the place ends up getting demolished after all those years, and like it gets like new buildings are built on top of it and stuff like that, this office block and stuff like that. I feel like there's a potential here for a sequel, like the same thing that was haunting the hospital, or the sorry, I keep calling it a hospital because it's it keeps reminding me of one. The thing that keeps haunting the old folks home of old is now haunting these office buildings. Like that could be an interesting like story to tell, like somebody from one of those buildings like having an encounter with like some elderly creepy ghosts that were left behind, basically. I'm actually kind of reminded of a story I heard while on one of the ghost tours in St. John's, Newfoundland. There's a modern bank office building where they say that it's haunted. And according to legend, the property itself was haunted previously. So it's just like there's something buried on that grounds, or on those grounds, that they never got rid of. And like from the original establishment or the original buildings that were there. And then they demolished those buildings and put up this like bank office. And now that office space is now supposedly haunted by the same thing. So, I also just love the idea of like somebody like set up like an office block, or like one of those what are they called, industrial parks, where like they have just like a bunch of like buildings like for mundane office building work and stuff like that. And the whatever they built on top of is like now like festering in those buildings, those new buildings.
I mean, that sort of thing has been done before, because like that's the whole like Indian burial ground kind of situation, right?
Yeah, well, it's like also Indian burial ground, or like the in Poltergeist they removed the tombstones, but they didn't move the bodies when they built the subdivision or the suburbs over top of the grounds. And that's why all the spirits were spoilers for like a movie from like 30 years ago. But like like that's why like all the ghost activity was happening in that one home in Poltergeist, was because they only the developers just moved the tombstones. They didn't move the bodies.
It was just for the one home. Wouldn't it be for the entire development?
Supposedly, well, I think it was just like maybe the one plot. Oh, because like the subdivision was like bigger than the cemetery. It was just like a graveyard kind of thing, like a small graveyard.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And their house was on the graveyard portion.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And then we go into the further movies where it's established that like there's underneath the cemetery there was also a cave where a bunch of like religious doomsday preppers died. Because their apocalypse never happened, and the reverend there, it goes on and just like layers upon layers. But yeah, your point of like the built on an Indian burial ground is definitely the trope of that kind of thing, of like you built on top of something and something that like might wake up and haunt your new building. So this is actually the last bit of the story is the coded message kind of stuff. So this is the quote. But they would also tell you that's not the worst thing about growing old. It's knowing there exists forces dark and sinister lurking beyond and waiting patiently, and that death may not mark the end of your torment, but merely the beginning. Tempus edax rerum erum quod es, eris quod sum. Time devours all. I was what you are. You'll be what I am. Okay. Despite the story's depressing depressing leanings early on, and a very like reflective, like melancholy, like bittersweetness at the beginning, this is a straight up like classic ghost story, like the kind of thing you'd see on one of those like shows about an asylum or old folks home or like old prison that like ghost hunters are exploring and stuff like that, and like talking and then they're like narrating like the history of the place and such like that. But yeah, so yeah, this one's very clearly like this story is very clearly like to me it felt very very much like in the same line as like a traditional or like a traditional style like ghost story that you'd hear in real life or like on one of those TV shows and stuff like that pop up on like the Outdoor Life Network. But yeah, that's all I've got for the worst thing about growing old for actual thoughts. So Mikey, D stands for evil.
All right. So my main issue with this is that this is clearly more of an insane asylum than an old folks home.
Yeah.
Like the fact that they confine this woman to a room for 2 whole days. If it were an old folks home, they would just lock the door on her room and keep her in her room if she was acting up.
Yeah, exactly. Like yeah.
Like
no, you're absolutely right. Like I know they're from experience of having a grandmother that was in an old folks home. I know that like that is kind of the procedure. Like they do like lock the doors and stuff like that. They don't just like, oh, you've been now again, we are dealing with like an earlier time period, like a couple of decades a few decades ago. So like
the thing
shit
is
was a little bit worse. But yeah.
They outright say that they turned this into a punishment room to try to keep people in line. Not saying that they can't lock them in their own rooms. They specifically made this for intimidation purposes, not because they needed it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the story explains this by like villainizing the administration staff.
yeah, and then the other thing is that old folks' home don't have night watchmen or guards to roam the halls. They have 24-hour nurses at
that
the nursing stations.
yes, and yeah. Again, I'm trying to like. I'm not 100% sure on like what they did like back like 50 years ago, which is when the story is. But yeah, you're right. Like nowadays, at least like and again from our modern experiences, like yeah, they have nurses. They don't necessarily have like security guards, but they would have
Well,
people on staff that would be like taking care of certain security things. But
it's
those
all
would be
nurses.
yeah,
Like for the uh for the
actually,
people that are hard to deal with,
yeah,
they actually have rules in place like do not enter his room alone
yeah,
or whatever. Like always have 2 or even 3 people with you when dealing with this one problem person.
yeah.
Like it's
Actually, also to your credit, the story is, or to your point, the story is also using terms like orderlies and such. And I'm like,
yeah,
again, that is more of I think that's more of a psychiatric like hospital term
yes.
rather than old folk. Again, that's the thing. Like this, it's being told we're being told up front that it's an old folks care home, but it's feeling more like an asylum.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
And that's what rubbed me the wrong way.
yeah,
Like if it was clear at the beginning saying this was an insane asylum or basically for the elderly and mentally unwell,
yeah,
then I wouldn't have as much of a problem as I do. But the fact that they call this an old folks home, that rubs me the wrong way because most insane asylums are run by the government and you're not paying to be there.
yeah. Yeah, and whereas this is clearly like this was being this is an establishment that had it was a business basically. So
Yeah.
it's like half of it like, and again, we're not experts. I want to point that I want to put that out there just in case we get a comment about it. And if somebody out there is more knowledgeable about this kind of these kind of establishments than we are, please let us know. Like we might be in the wrong, but to us, it does seem like this is sort of like the person who wrote this. It's like half of it is like an old folks place, and then half of it is like an asylum, or like how it
Yeah.
operates.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And based on what little I know of Canadian um, insane asylums,
yeah,
um,
we actually have one
it,
nearby. we have
yeah,
a
well, we
population
used
nearby.
to.
We used to, but we also there's also the modern one that's in another place nearby. And we
Yeah.
also like grew up in a town that has multiple senior homes. Like
Yeah.
one of their main well, most of the population, like half, like I think like half the population is seniors, and like there is a very thriving old folks care business or like industry in our
Hmm.
hometown. So yeah,
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
know we know some stuff. We have kind of like a gleaning knowledge
Mhm.
of this kind of stuff. But yeah,
Yeah. Um, and then my next note here is that she didn't touch any of her food that was brought to her.
yeah,
But there's no mention of whether or not she took her meds. Like,
that's true. Yeah, or her vitamins at least.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah,
those,
they're treating it like solitary, like they just drop her in there for 2 days and leave her alone, do
Which
nothing.
is not
yeah,
how you should. And again, it's pointed out that these people are assholes and absolute scum of the earth. So like they're not doing their job. But yeah, they should be doing. They this like what they're doing is definitely like mistreating their clients.
yeah. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
End of the story, though.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not like
exactly.
it's a normal old folks home with all this weird shit happening. It's a fucked up old folks home with all this shit happening. It's doubling down on the badness.
It is an old like old style old folks home that has like apparently has the same staff as like an asylum or a mental hospital from that time period specifically also because like again like I like to think that like we've come a long way from like the 50s and 60s and 70s with like healthcare with elderly healthcare and even like like mental health care like facilities and stuff. So I hope I'm right on that and like not wrong on that, but like hopefully I'm not naive. But like yeah, this is definitely like show again. The thing to remember is this is showing like an earlier time period of this kind of stuff. But in that, sometimes you get a little mixed up with like how things are run. So
well, we have come a long way, but old folks' home are still greedy buggers.
Yeah. No, that is true. Yeah.
Like one of the things they do is before an inspection, they'll make sure they have excess amount of nurses on staff that show up when the inspector shows up.
Yeah.
Because the inspector has to tell them what day he's going to be there so they can prep for that. And then the next day after the inspection's done, they're back to minimal staff.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that that just really annoys me more than anything.
That's fair. Yeah.
But it is sort of built, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that bugs you out of game or like that bugs you in real life. Not just in the story. But again, to the story's credit, it is also showing that like yes, these people are assholes and idiots and scum. So that's why like it's even more deplorable like living conditions here. But again, I'm also kind of with you as like I'm not sure how much of this is like actually representing old folks care home and what's just representing like the like even like possibly even like the movie version of what an asylum is, which is kind of what it felt like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I can understand your grievance there. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, that's the end of my actual thoughts.
Okay. Gamer.
Let's see what I have left.
Now that you've finished reading the story and
I had more than enough time to read the whole story now.
Sorry, now that's just stuck in my brain since you brought that up.
That I never read beforehand.
Yeah, you just like, oh yeah, I actually don't got anything. You guys all brought up all the points I would have brought up. Yeah, totally.
I'll just be listening this whole time and not actually contributing, really.
Yeah.
I'm just putting in my 2 cents every now and then. Yeah, it's fine. No.
Congrats, you've made me paranoid.
It's fine. Okay, so I had to mute myself a couple of times during recording, so I may have missed if you brought this up. The Stanford prison experiment, did you bring that up?
I did not. No.
I'm shocked. Okay, I'm glad I wrote a note to remind myself. So throughout this, there's a link to when it references the Stanford prison experiment. And upon clicking the link, it's not like a different creepypasta. It takes you to the Wikipedia page of a real life event that happened where they did a psychological study bringing in random people to act as guards for actual prisoners and see what they do. And the shit they did was deplorable over the span of like 6 days. And they shut that shit down.
Yeah.
Which kind of seems like that's what the inspiration for this story was, to a point.
Probably. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
But the problem is that's a prison versus an old folks home.
Yeah. Which like, again, I do want to like I don't mean to keep stressing this, but back then, like in the 60s and 70s, like those kind of places were all kind of I have a feeling they were all very similar in terms of
worse back then, I'm sure.
Yeah. But
so while yes, this is not actually a prison, and it's not saying it's a prison.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
And yeah, like
you can die on that hill if you want. It's just I'm not on that hill with you.
Well, I could also be wrong. Like again, that's like anybody else out there who like who's listening to us and like is familiar with that industry. If you feel the need to like let us know, please by all means. Like we are not experts.
Oh hell no. I'm an expert at Killer Instinct and Warframe. That's probably it. And Helldivers. That's about it. Oh, and shoveling. Shoveling, hell yeah. I'm the best. But that's about it.
Yeah, I feel like our knowledge here is just like kind of like personal stuff because like again, I imagine all of us have had elderly family members that like have gone to like an old folks home at some point or had some contact with an old folks home because of relations. But yeah, I'm sorry to keep bringing that up or I just keep like hammering that out, but
he's fine. And then we get the blood words that are on the wall, and like even though they like put up wallpaper and paint over it, it just keeps coming through, which is cool.
Yeah.
But like I'm wondering, did they ever try putting a painting over it?
Oh god, it
would be cool.
That would be really
It'd be cool if it like seeped into the painting even and like messed with the imagery of the painting.
I was gonna straight up say like if they like so like the way it was like the way like no matter how much paint or no how like wallpaper they put on it always bleeds through. That's very like that's straight up a poltergeist activity. Because in one of the signatures of like a haunting and specifically like poltergeist hauntings, you'll find portraits and like photos and paintings on walls of a house that's haunted. Will sometimes have like tampering, like the throats all have like red lines across them, or like they're like almost like they're bleeding, like their throats have been slit. And so yeah, you just put like a painting there on that spot, and they'd probably have to like bolt it there so that like the person didn't like maybe grab it and then hurt themselves with it or something. Like use it as some kind of implement. But yeah, that would be really cool if it just like bled over into like the words bled into the painting. Like that extra layer, no matter how much they tried, like that straight up is like, all right, that's supernatural. Like how do you explain that to guys? Yeah.
Much. Then we get where it says, despite these assurances, residents and staff still avoided the suicide room. Even a luxurious renovation cannot convince any residents to move in. A profit-minded administration, it was too valuable a space to be left unused. In 1971, they had seemed like a clever idea. World War 306 would be used as an unofficial punishment room. So if they weren't assholes, why didn't they just like turn it into a utility room or a storage room? Something that people aren't living in, but they could still make use of it as far as like management is concerned.
Yeah, if they weren't assholes, that's what it would have ended up with. But for some reason, their superintendent or like their head guy was just like, yes, let's use this to our advantage.
Twirling his mustache all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't twirling an imaginary mustache. I was just like kind of like rubbing my hands together. It's like yes.
Yes, very Smithers or Mr. Burns rather.
Excellent. Yeah, very much so. Very again, these guys are like again hate this administration staff.
Then we get to the point where it's like other residents told of tapping noises like hard claws against the tiles from under the bed. They would feel their blankets slowly being dragged from below. It would start as a gentle pull, like a heavy blanket slowly falling from its own weight. If they attempted to pull it back up, the tugging would suddenly become stronger and more violent. I really like the creep from that. Like, it's really subtle. Like, it could be something that's not actually like a creature doing it. Like, it's something that's potentially believable as just like it's just falling off, but you're imagining shit.
Yeah. It's like you're encountering like sleep paralysis. Honestly, this is kind of entering like sleep paralysis like situation, but
or the creature's just messing with him, or the creature under there is just cold.
Yeah,
he's sleeping under the bed, no blanket, no nothing.
If you're cold, they're cold. Give them a blanket.
Yeah, share.
Yeah, share your blanket. The monster under your bed wants a blanket too. Probably even more so because he's sleeping on a hard floor, on a hard cold floor. This suddenly just becomes a buddy horror.
It's very easily could do that.
Yep.
Then we get this. The family of Mrs. Wainwright were appalled by livid by the news of her death. They sued the Sunset Eden. and eventually settled out of court for an undisclosed amount in agreement to never speak about this incident. So, WTS heard about this story from his uncle, who heard the story from someone who worked at the old age home, who signed an agreement not to tell anyone about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was probably like not talking anything about it while the business was running. Now that the business has been like long since like demolished and like things, so like now you can talk about that shit. Like the company probably doesn't even exist anymore. That was like running it. So like the NDA is over.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like it on a surface. Yeah, like well, wow. How does the WTS know? But like if you think about it a little bit, like the group, like it doesn't exist anymore. So like there's no one stopping you from like spilling the beans.
Pretty much.
Yep.
And then my last note is just I really like the zinger at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like reading that, like give me chills. It was like, ooh, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like to me it reminds me of Vigo the Carpathian's last living statement in Ghostbusters 2. Time is but a doorway, or hang on, life is but a doorway. Time is but a window. I'll be back. Like just the way, like it's like the three statement or the three sentence statement kind of thing. The way it is, but
I'm glad I didn't look it up beforehand what it meant, and I'm glad you didn't either, because I was worried you did. You would. It's like, what the fuck does that mean? I'm gonna look it up.
I straight up didn't. No, partially because like I had when I was again copying this from Reddit to my Google Doc so I could grab the quotes more efficiently. I did notice that there was like some bold Latin in the halfway through the story, and then at the bottom there was something in italics. The only thing in the story that's in italics.
Fuck you.
But I didn't actually look at what the words were and had no context. So like I just read the story from the top and then like went from there and like then got that actually right at the moment as I was reading it. So yeah. But yeah, sorry to ruin the story by saying like there was some italics in it.
I hate italics are the worst.
It is. It's
Were they
so
like bolded as well though?
No, the first the middle the first use of it, which is like just the Latin, is in bold. But then at the bottom is both the Latin and the English translation are in italics.
Stupid italics, I hate them. But yeah,
I hate you.
But that's all I got for notes.
All right. Well then, on to final thoughts. Almost said actual thoughts.
Run it back.
From the top. No. Oh, hello. Yeah, on to final thoughts. So yeah, I'm still gonna recommend it. It's sad at first, just with like the melancholy and the reflection on life and death. But then ramps up to the classic creeps in the way that only a ghost story can, to me. So like, yeah, there's a problem where like the story kind of seems to us to confuse an old folks care home with an asylum, but I kind of just chalk that up to like the sign of the times sort of situation, or like when the story was taking place, or like maybe it was like that back then. So I was willing to give that part of it a pass, and so that's why I will recommend it. It is sad. It starts off sad and then ends with a cool, creepy like kind of finisher. So it felt very real. It felt like this could actually have been a ghost story that somebody would tell you about a location. So, but yeah, that's my recommendation. Mikey, these stands for evil.
And as the polar opposite, the whole reason why I'm hating this is because it's treated as an asylum as opposed to an old folks' home.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving it a pass for it being part of the times, because I choose to believe that humans are good people.
That's your problem.
There's the problem right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and the whole sort of solitary confinement of a resident, just rubbed me the wrong way, because like this is not something that I could see happening in an old folks' home. If it was an insane asylum, yes.
Yeah.
But they've stated multiple times as an old folks' home, and as such, that's what I'm expecting, not an insane asylum. So my head canon was not where it should be. It was pointed in the wrong direction.
To your point as well, like earlier you were saying like these kind of places would be run by nurses, not orderlies and like night watchmen and stuff like that. I'm also pretty sure like this kind of place is also like that aspect of like a place like this being run by nurses is also where we got the trope of Nurse Ratched. Like the bitch, like the uber bitch, strict nurse. So like I think pretty sure it's from like these kind of places. So yeah. Or like from stories in these kind of places. So yeah. Actually, now that I think about that, that was Nurse Ratched was from I think who the jumped over the cuckoo's nest or something like that, which was an asylum, but
yeah. So yeah.
I'll shut up.
All that said, I'm still 100% not recommending this.
Okay.
As the polar opposite to you.
Fair.
Just to counter you.
Well, no. Like again, like
I know.
Yeah. I understand, Mikey. You need to be contrary. No. But no, like yeah, I get it. Like it is sort of a go with your gut kind of situation on this matter. So.
Mm-hmm.
The gamer, will you be the deciding factor?
Who I side with now?
He's gonna go partial.
Yeah. We can all go to prom.
I've done that so many times.
It's fine. You like
it's
that?
Not
we're all different personalities. It makes sense. We have different views on shit.
I'm getting chafed from sitting on the fence so many times.
Just grinding on that fence.
No. I'm putting my foot down. I'm falling off this one side of the fence onto the recommendation side of the fence. Because overall, I still enjoyed the story. I liked how... I like the real feel of it, even though it's real sad. Like how it starts being like, oh, fuck. Thanks.
Yeah, like...
The twist at the end felt good. I liked that there's multiple instances that are very different of the deaths happening in the room. It's not just the same thing happening over and over again, which would be like really stale. But yeah, and like the twist of like this lady's fighting them, and the second she goes through the threshold, just like immediately shuts off.
Yeah, just immediately.
That was like really good. But all that being said, I do agree with you, Mikey. They are extremely brutal here to the point of it being like an insane asylum. Because realistically, they should be able to go about their days and go out to
like these are
into town and do stuff.
Like unless we're misinterpreting like what this kind like daycare or this old folks care home is compared to a senior home. But like I feel like they're paying for like these are not patients. These are clients that are paying for this residence and assistance because they can't independently live with themselves, like live alone. Like
now with the punishment room, it's not necessarily that they're put in there and locked in there as solitary. Maybe it's more like, okay, for 2 nights, you live in this room. When you go to sleep, you're sleeping in this room. You can go about your day. We're going to make some lunch soon. We're going to go
also, actually,
shuffleboard, but you're sleeping here.
Yeah. Also, again, I know like some depending, it's a case-by-case basis. Some people in some of these homes like do require like their food to be brought to them to their apartment, to their room. But there's usually like a public cafeteria area that they like serve like meals at and some of that. Yeah. There's also like a common area. Like again, like I'm going off of my own personal experience with like a grandmother being in one of these places.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I'm not adverse to what you're saying, Mikey. I'm just willing to give the story a pass because it might be more historically accurate than what our unfortunately modern what's that word? Like our like our modern, it's at the tip of my tongue.
Ideologies.
No, not ideologies.
Oh.
Like our modern sensibilities.
Sensibilities, there
are
we go.
willing to forgo. Yeah,
And historically accurate people shooting their heads off in
that is
old folks' homes.
Well,
I
we
mean,
explained that was Sam Fisher. He had
Yeah.
a job to assassinate those guys.
Yeah, Mr. Fisher's there. Mr. Sam Fisher,
Mhm.
former assassin and Spec Ops guy. Also, I could chalk this up without, but it'd be mean to an entire country. America.
I mean, no, but yeah.
Yeah.
So-
So
Overall, I'm still going to recommend it. It's not like 100% perfect story, best 10 out of 10, but it's very, very serviceable. Like,
Yeah.
maybe with a little bit of different explanation of how the punishment room is used. Like, if it's meant to be solitary and shit, like, that's fucked up and weird, and I don't know if that would be a thing, but it's left in the open how it's used, so I don't know.
well, and like again, the story does try to like say like explain why they have this punch room is that the administration staff are assholes. Like, so that's how they're like, again, they're on a power trip kind of thing. And like,
Yep.
I was even going to try and retort that like, oh, well, like maybe the story was written more like it was an asylum, but then that kind of defeats the theme of like the worst thing about growing old, because like not all those places have just old people. They have like just really the infirm, like the young and the old that are mentally infirm. So yeah.
Mhm.
It's yeah, like there's definitely room for improvement. I'm not going to like deny that, but I was definitely I'm willing to give it a pass because of like for the bulk of the story, it was impactful to me. So, but again, not trying to change your mind, Mikey. Just
We're on my final thoughts. You're back
Yeah.
to him now.
Yeah, and Gamer, yeah, like so Gamer, you're still on the recommendation.
Yeah, I'll still recommend it, but I see you, Mikey.
Yeah, we see you on the other side of the fence.
Hmm.
As I put an arm around Gamer's shoulders.
Don't touch me.
All right. Well, I guess that'll do it for this week's episode. 2 recommendations and a non-recommendation. Room for improvement, but strong roots here. Strong foundation to go with the whole theme of like a building, and such. So, but that'll do it for this week's episode. If you like what you heard, or if you didn't, leave us a comment in the comment section below, where this gets posted. We're all on Twitter, kind of. Mikey is at the East Ends for Evil. The Gamer in Yellow is at the Gamer in Yellow, but without that W at the end because his name is very long.
Yeah.
And I'm at Review Cultist. I'm also on Blue Sky as Review Cultist, so you can check me out there. You can also send us emails at aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. That's ALDENTERIGAMORTIS @gmail.com. You can also leave us suggestions for other creepypastas, SCPs, spooky things. You creep it, we'll peep it. Yeah! And if you'd like to help support our show financially, you can go to Patreon. We have special episodes, early access, and extra content. To all our patrons that are helping support the show, thank you immensely. You're helping keep those hosting bills at bay. And as always, we very much appreciate that. And to our listeners and the authors of these stories, thank you immensely, because without your listenership, it'd be like screaming into the void. And without your authorship, writing and posting these stories on the internet, we really wouldn't have much of a show because we'd have nothing to talk about. So thank you. Until next time, I have been your host, Review Cultist.
I'm Mikey, E stands for Evil.
And I'm the Gamer in Yellow.
And this has been Al Dente Rigamortis. Sleep well.